everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out this evening, despite the gloom and the rain, and being with us here tonight. My name is Amali, and I'm the events director at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to have these two best-selling authors, Jennifer Haigh and Maria Semple, with us tonight to celebrate the launch of Jennifer's newest novel, Rabbit Moon. They're going to tell you much more about this novel, but it is truly an immersive story of one fractured family trying to pull themselves together amidst the bustling backdrop of Shanghai. There's much to discuss in these pages, but before we get officially started, I just have a few logistics to point out for how tonight's event is going to go. First up, we will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so please start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. After the talk tonight, Jennifer will be around to sign and personalize your books at the alcove next to where you checked in. We'll let you know where and when to start lining up for that. And finally, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of Rabbit Moon online using the link in the live stream description. Now I'm going to read some quick bios and we're going to dive right in. Jennifer Haigh is the author of 7 best-selling, critically acclaimed works of fiction. Her first, Mrs. Kimball, won the PEN Hemingway Award for debut fiction, and her latest, Mercy Street, was named a Best Book of 2022 by The New Yorker and won the Mark Twain American Voice in Literature Award. A Guggenheim Fellow and graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, she lives in Boston. And as I mentioned earlier, Maria Semple joins Jennifer in conversation tonight. Maria is the author of This One Is Mine, Where'd You Go, Bernadette, and Today Will Be Different. Her new novel, Go Gentle, comes out in 2026. That's all for me. Please join me in giving Jennifer and Maria a very warm welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm so excited and intimidated to be talking to Jennifer, who I just think is one of the best writers going today. I mean, she's a lovely friend, but then every time I read one of her books, I just think, oh, I'm not worthy, because your sentences, just all your observations are incredible. And this book really, this to me is my favorite book of yours that you've written. And I know that it was quite a journey getting this book written. So could you tell us about it?
Yeah. So this is a book I sort of backed into. It was a book I never intended to write. What happened was I was working on an earlier novel that became Mercy Street, and I got a fellowship to go to Shanghai. And once I was there, I intended to work on Mercy Street, and I quickly discovered this was not even possible. At that point, I'd lived in Boston for 14 years, and I could not remember what Boston looked like. Shanghai was so overwhelming. It was my first time traveling in Asia, my first experience in a mega city of 30 million people. And it was just overwhelmed the senses and made it impossible to imagine being anywhere else or want to be anywhere else. So I started writing a story set there. Now, in the time I was in Shanghai, I was living in an apartment tower, a tall apartment tower, which, like many buildings in China, had some businesses on every floor as well as apartments. So you might have an acupuncture clinic and a nail salon and some apartments in between them. And I was on a floor 2 doors down from a hair salon. And I became very fascinated with the comings and goings of people from this hair salon. So it was an unusual time in my life. It was deeply lonely being there. I don't speak Chinese. It was the first time I'd spent a stretch of time in a country where I didn't speak the language. I'm good at languages, but Chinese to me was completely impenetrable. And I felt isolated by the language. So what happens to writers, I think, in that situation is that you go further into your imagination. And that's where this book came from.
And so you wrote it, and then, so how much of it did you write there?
I wrote a lot. I wrote a lot very quickly. Maybe I kind of roughed out half the book or more, maybe 2/3 of the book, but very roughly, not finished pages. And then I came back to Boston, and I still had this other novel I wanted to finish. So I did that. I'm incapable of doing 2 things at once. So I put this book down for a really long time and finished writing Mercy Street. So long that I had no expectation that these pages would still feel alive to me when I looked at them again. I'd never done that before. In the past, when I've put work down for a year or more, it feels dead to me, and I never want to touch it again. But this book, even after it was about 5 years, almost 5 years, I didn't even look at it. And it still felt alive, and I still wanted to live inside that story and be with those characters. It was surprising to me, honestly.
And did you have like notebooks of just observations? Because it's almost like like you're reporting it. I mean, the detail is so fantastic. It's just so surgical, the detail that you write with. And I can't imagine that you could make that stuff up. I mean, if you like the rest of the book, did you have notes and moments that you had then were able to draw from, like in notebooks?
Yeah, I had written a lot of that kind of thing too. I think one of the things that happens when you're in a completely new environment is you have fresh eyes. And I think I was more observant in my time there than I am in my normal life. So that's a piece of it. Also,
Right.
because, you know, without recourse to language, what do you have? You know, you have other kinds of observation. And so I think all of that is related to it. But I took copious notes and kind of broke down scenes, you know, pieces of scenes. So I had all that material to parse through when I got back.
I see. And was your way into the story was there one character in particular that you kind of latched onto first and then it grew from that? Or how does that work for you?
It always begins with a character. In this case, and this is unusual for me, this novel began in my imagination exactly where the book begins, with this young woman, 22-year-old American woman, standing on the sidewalk early on a Sunday morning in the financial district of Shanghai, like 3, 4 in the morning, staring at her phone. So that is exactly where the story began for me, with that character. She's an American woman. Her name is Lindsay. She's 22 years old when the story starts. And she is living in China. She came to China to teach English, dropped out of college, and came to China to teach English and to get away from her family, importantly. So much of this novel is about that. It's about this ruptured family and how exactly it went off the rails and what prompted her to flee to the other side of the world to get away from her parents. The other spark for this story had to do with my experience in Shanghai. It is a city of the fiercest traffic I have ever experienced anywhere. And, I mean, Boston is full of sociopathic drivers, but Shanghai traffic is a whole other level. I mean, this is a city that became wealthy quite recently. So a generation ago, most people did not have cars. And now cars are everywhere. The city is one big traffic jam. And on a nearly daily basis, I saw a fender bender or a bike accident or a pedestrian get hit nearly every day. And I got really scared about crossing the street. I saw so many scary things happen. And so as anxieties will do, it started to have its way with me. And I was like, well, God, what would happen if I got hit by a car? They'd have to find my family. How would they do that? I guess through the consulate. And so I kind of went down this rabbit hole. What would happen to me if I got hit by a car here? And so that's what happens. This is not a spoiler because it happens in the first 2 pages. This American woman gets hit by a car. And everything else that happens in the book departs from that moment.
And so how did you, I mean, I don't know if this is even answerable, but how did you build it out from there? Like, how did you choose the family and the history? And I mean, I'm just curious, like, were you working backwards from this woman and thought, how did she get this way? And then build this kind of world around her?
Yeah.
Of her family?
Yeah, it absolutely started with her. But it's always hard to try to reconstruct how you invented a story.
Yeah.
Because after you've written the book, and this book has been finished for a year, I suppose, now that it's out. It seems to me now that I just wrote what happened. which is nuts because none of it happened. I made it all up.
Right,
It's
right.
entirely invented, but it feels like I'm just telling a story of something that I know happened.
Right. I feel it's like giving birth that you forget the pain, you know, that it's like, oh, it was just easy to do, but it really wasn't
Well, this
easy
is
to
why
do.
anybody has more
Yeah,
than one novel.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so this book is so fast paced. I mean, that's one of the things I
Mm.
just loved about it. It's just like it's so propulsive, and it's like, um, can we call it a mystery? It feels like kind of a
It kind of
mystery in some
is, you
ways.
know?
I mean,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's a departure from your other books in that sense. And so could you talk about that?
Yeah. The pace of it was surprising to me, in fact. Unlike anything else I've ever written before or since, this book was largely written in public spaces. I never do that. I'm not the kind of writer who can sit in a cafe and get anything done. I need to look at a blank wall. I don't even want a window. I rent this office space where I'm looking at a blank wall. I'm wearing earplugs, and then I wear those earmuffs that construction workers wear over the earplugs.
Wow.
And it's a quiet building anyway, so I don't even know what I'm blocking out. But that is my usual MO when I'm writing. So it was astonishing to me to be in Shanghai and be composing pages in a tea house, in a train station, in a public park. The reason I could do that was because I could not understand anything anybody was saying. Now, I'm really good at languages, so if I'm traveling in Germany or in Italy or in Denmark, I'll get really distracted by trying to figure out what people are saying. And I have just enough skill with language that I can sort of do it. This is impossible for me in Chinese. I can't even hear individual words. And so I could be out among people, observing people, looking at the life around me, and still, you know, have my own language in my head because there was no other language coming in that I could decipher.
Mm.
So it was the pace of the novel really reflects the pace of life in that city, where everything just seems turbocharged. You know, everything moves fast. It's a very young city. It's it's not a pace that I think is natural to me, or it never was before. I'm writing something else now, and I'm back to my old pace. So
Mm.
it's really Shanghai that
Wow.
provided that pace. It's a little bit like a flip book. Remember flip books?
Yeah.
You know, it's like the line drawings, and you thumb through them and watch the pictures move, and it kind of moves at that pace.
Wow. That's interesting. Now, uh, I thought a lot about faith when I was reading this book because I feel like the characters don't personally have a lot of faith, but there feels like there's some kind of bigger force at that you're writing about that I think
Mm,
you're quite unsentimental about. And
mm,
there's a section about people being about the improbability of people ever crossing
mm,
paths.
mm,
And this whole book is kind of I'd say every I guess you could say this about life, but every major relationship just feels like such a roll of the dice that it
mm.
even happened. And so I'm wondering, because you have written about faith so much in your other books, one of them was called Faith. I'm just wondering what your feeling was about it in this book, or if you, you know, were intentional, or you're intentional about everything,
Mm.
but what, how does it fit into this book?
You know, faith is an issue in almost everything I write, not by choice, but because I had this very religious upbringing. I went to 12 years of Catholic school. You know, I was from this family where it was a common thing to have a priest at Sunday dinner. So I am incapable of conceiving of characters without considering religion and spirituality, even though all these characters are atheists,
Right.
mostly. Um, but I can't write characters who've never thought about it. So my atheist characters have thought a lot about being atheists, and my agnostic characters have thought a lot about being agnostic. Um, the the two of the important characters in this novel are Lindsay's parents, who find out about this hit and run accident and do what any parent would do. They get on a plane and go to China. Her parents are acrimoniously divorced, and one of the reasons why their marriage failed was they did not have similar orientations when it came to spirituality. So Lindsay's father, Aaron, has a very scientific way of looking at the world. He's completely dismissive of all religious faith. And Lindsay's mother is a seeker. She's not religious, but she yearns to believe in something. So that's a way in which they never quite connected. So that there's that faith piece of the story. And then there's this other thing that I think you're talking about, Maria, and it really is mathematics.
Oh, interesting.
It's,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of this came from my sense of the sheer numbers of everything being in Shanghai, the population of the city, and the consequent logistical difficulty of absolutely everything, like trash pickup in a city of 30 million people, recycling in a city of 30 million people. Where is the landfill? Where do you take the trash? How can you even conceive of life existing on this scale? And that got me thinking about probabilities and improbabilities, and the sort of accidental meetings of these characters and how truly unlikely they are, which is true anywhere at any time, but it's something I was acutely aware of in a city this size. Even finding someone you're looking for is almost impossible.
Yeah. It's one of the things I really loved about the book is that it's like a tough book, it's unsentimental in a really, I think, refreshing way. It just it lets us feel and kind of make the connections. And I really love how kind of uncompromising you are towards like sentimentality and things like that. It's just like but yet there's so much heart in it. And I feel like the sister relationship is one of the most beautiful uh just threads of the book. And it's just so gentle and sweet and kind of unexpectedly and consistently loving. And so could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So in Lindsay's family, Lindsay is the young woman who's hit by the car. You meet her parents, Aaron and Claire, and you also meet her younger sister, Grace. Grace is 11 years younger than Lindsay, and she was adopted from China. So right off the bat, their extreme closeness is a little unlikely. Just that enormous age difference. It's rare for, I think, sisters to have that degree of closeness. Grace is the one person in her family that Lindsay stays in touch with while she's living in China. She wants nothing at all to do with her parents, but she never loses touch with Grace. Her relationship with Grace is unusually in a family. She met Grace the same instant her mother did, because she went with her mother to China to bring back this infant girl from an orphanage in Chongqing. So I'm going to read just a little bit about that. This is I'm going to read for like a minute, but this is sort of an introduction to Lindsay and Grace. This is Lindsay in the hospital shortly after the accident. The comatose girl breathes deeply. A student nurse washes her arms and legs. The long limbs are slender and heavy. Her pale skin smells of milk. The student nurse studies the character inked on her shoulder. Except for a scraped elbow, her body shows no sign of trauma. All the damage happened above the neck. The comatose girl dreams of rabbits. They're her little sister's favorite animal. Grace is 11 and enchanted by them. For months now, she has lobbied their mother for a pet rabbit, so far without success. Lindsay met her at the same instant their mother did. Grace was then 7 months old, living in a state-run orphanage in Chongqing. There exists in some family album a photo taken that morning. Lindsay with a ponytail and a mouthful of braces, holding her new sister. Grace with pink eye and a persistent rash on her cheek. Invisible in the photo is Grace's scar, a white circle at the base of her neck, the size of a pencil eraser, where she had been burned with a cigarette. She was not an abused child, they were told through an interpreter. Her birth mother had marked her so that she could be identified later, in this life or the next. Who was she? Lindsay asked. The interpreter relayed the question to an attendant, who responded at length. That she couldn't understand the answer is the great regret of Lindsay's life. The interpreter's translation was 4 words long. she was very poor. Later, when Grace was older, their mother taught her the Chinese legend of the red thread, an invisible cord that connects each person to her future, to all those destined to love her in the course of her life. From the day Grace was born, the red thread connected her to the Litvacs. She was meant to be Claire and Aaron's daughter and Lindsay's sister. Of course, no one mentioned Grace's birth mother, the very poor woman so desperate to keep her that she'd burned her baby with a cigarette. This detail would have ruined the story, would have proven definitively that the red thread could be cut.
That's great. I mean, that reminds me that all these characters are kind of living in their own narrative of what happened. You know, it's the marriage of Claire and Aaron, and they still kind of at the end don't know about Lindsay. I mean, I think that's what I was talking about it being kind of unsentimental. It's kind of great that way. You know what I mean? That it's like everyone is just very inside their own version of events.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that's something I run into all the time writing novels. I'm fascinated with that Kurosawa film Rashomon, where you see the same series of events recounted by different characters who remember it entirely differently and ascribe different motives to the people involved. And to me, a novel is always about the gulf between the way different characters remember what happened and the stories we tell ourselves about what happened and why it happened. If you have adult siblings, you've experienced this at Thanksgiving dinner, where there is no event from your childhood that everybody will remember in the same way. And it's particularly true when you're writing about families. So in the case of the Litvacs, Claire and Aaron remember their marriage very differently. They have different beliefs about why the marriage failed. And because you go into these different points of view, it's the contrast is comical sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it is a very funny, I mean, there's some funny passages.
It doesn't sound funny, I
No.
know, but there are moments of funny.
Yeah, there are definitely moments of funny, and I mean, maybe I don't remember them from your other books, but it felt like I love that that date with Jerry, the former priest,
Yeah.
in the beginning. I think that was genuinely as funny a scene as I've ever read. And where did that come from?
I have no, well, I like priests. I'm interested in priests, and I've written so much about priests. So I feel like I have all these priest outtakes in my head, and I could whip those out at any given moment. So early, Maria's talking about a scene very early in the book where this is before the accident. Claire's mother, Lindsay's mother, Claire, who's been divorced for 3 years, goes on a date. She's been set up by a friend of hers, and she finds out the guy she's being set up with has left the priesthood, and it's just a supremely awkward first date. So yeah, I think it's just a priest outtake from Faith, maybe.
Now, do you know where the book's going to end, when you started, or how?
Oh God, no.
Oh,
never.
seriously? Never. Okay.
No clue. And in fact, that's why writing the first draft is so miserable, because I'm always afraid I'm not going to find the right ending. And you've all had this experience as readers where you start reading a book, you fall in love with the characters, you're totally into it, and the ending is so bad that you throw it across the room. And you don't remember it as the book with the great opening chapter. You remember it as the book with the lame ending. So I'm always afraid of writing that book with a lame ending. And until I get through the first draft, I never trust that I'm going to find the right ending for it. I know you and I maybe work differently in this way because you have a background in television. And I never outline a story when I'm writing a novel. I don't think about plot at all. What I think about instead is causality. So the way I work typically is I dream up these characters. I live with them for a stretch of time. I write about them. I write little biographies of them. I get to know where they came from. And then by the time I sit down to write, chapter 1, I know who they are. I know them so well that I have a pretty fair idea how they would react in any given circumstance. Then I make one thing happen, just one thing. So in the case of Rabbit Moon, it's that hit and run accident. That is the one thing that I made happen. And the rest of the novel is just playing out that causal chain. Then what happened? And what did that lead to? And what did that lead to? So it is just causality. And there is the uncaused cause. There's the one thing I forced to happen. And the rest of it is consequence.
So you spend time, like, like you literally write up backstories and things.
Oh yeah.
Oh gee. Okay,
For like months.
I'd be like, oh
Months.
God, I need to be writing. I need to be writing. I'm not just going to write bios or like their favorite playlist or anything.
Yeah.
It's like I got to get the fucking words on the page.
Right.
Yeah. But you do this.
I do this.
Okay. Well, you're doing it right. So okay.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I do it the only way I can do it. I guess is the answer.
Amazing.
Which is
how much time do you spend on all this stuff that's not in my take of it writing?
Yeah. Months. Months.
Months.
Like,
oh my gosh.
months.
I
Yeah.
have anxiety right now.
I mean,
about it. Okay.
3 months, 6 months. Part of it is procrastinating because I'm afraid to start writing the book. But also when I don't know who the people are, I feel like I'm just, I don't know. I feel like I'm talking out of my ass a little bit if I don't know who they are. You know?
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting, because and then, but how do you know that there's going to be enough plot, that they're like kind of crazy or driven enough that they're going to like cause excitement in the story that's going to
I don't.
Okay.
And that's the whole problem. I don't know that. I hope that,
Uh-huh.
but I don't ever know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And so do you ever like get to the a point where it's just kind of slowing down because people aren't kind of acting crazy enough or something?
Oh, it slows down all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
And so what do you do then?
Oh, you sit there and stare at it and
I see. Okay.
try something, and that doesn't work, and then you try something else.
I see.
Yeah, it's a great process. I
Okay.
mean, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So now you are you're working on something now, you were saying. Wow. So how far are you into the new book and stuff?
I'm in a first draft. I think I've gotten through the first act of it. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm in the anxious stage where I have no idea where this is going to go or how anything will resolve or if it will or if it's viable.
How often do you write? How far do you get, or in terms of page length or percentage of a book or act, what acts, or time before you have said like, yeah, this isn't working? Like, have you ever spent years or
I once spent a year.
a year?
A year. That's the longest I've ever spent on a manuscript that I've thrown away.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say a year, I don't do anything else. Like at the time, like I wasn't teaching. I didn't write a short story. I didn't write a book review. I didn't even have a dog. I don't have kids. I didn't have a life. This was all I was doing.
Wow.
Was writing this every single day. And then I threw it away.
Wow.
So this is 2008, a year for which I have nothing to show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so and none of that has come back.
No.
Like, yeah, interesting.
No, I haven't even looked at it again.
Yeah.
And it's a painful thing to throw away something you've worked on for a solid year. It was hard to reach that point where I was willing to do it. But I knew it was the right answer because my grief was far outweighed by my relief.
Relief.
That I didn't have to look at that thing anymore.
I agree. I agree that
it was a win.
Abandoned things, and it's a great feeling.
It is great.
I mean, it's so
it was
perverse,
a win. Yeah.
Because it's so awful leading up to it. You
Yeah.
know? And then when you abandon it, it's just a great feeling.
Oh yeah, you get your life back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's great. And so when you say like when you get to the end of the draft, a first draft, do you ever then fully restructure it or throw out the ending, or when?
Oh,
or
yeah.
when okay.
Oh yeah, that happens.
Okay, so it's not like once you've got a draft, you feel like you're on solid kind of plot ground. or whatever.
Sometimes, but not always.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get closer than others, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, is this your 8th book?
Rabbit Moon is my 8th book.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, a writer, the novelist James Salter once said to me that he feels like everybody writes the same novel, and I thought that was really interesting. And
Well, he certainly did.
Yeah, he does. That's absolutely true. But on a level, do you feel like there's something that you're always kind of trying to kind of get through, like figure out or deal with in your writing? Is there one thing that in common?
No, I don't think so.
Really
Yeah.
interesting. And so, what is it? Is it? Are you driven like emotionally starting a book? Is it like a thought about like, oh, a woman standing on the corner, or is it more like an emotional thing you're trying to figure out, like the spark usually, you know what I mean? Is it, do you feel like it comes from your heart or like from kind of a question in your mind?
It's, I can't generalize about that. 3 of my books are set in the town where I grew up. It's a little coal mining town, northern Appalachia, western Pennsylvania. And I've been writing about that town on and off for 20 years. Every time I do it, I think, okay, now I'm done. I don't have to do that again. And then something kind of draws me back to that. So in that case, it is the place. It is the kind of open wound that place is.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Andrew, who's here tonight, my friend from back home. Yes. Yes. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So these are my people.
Okay.
So this part of Western Pennsylvania has been absolutely decimated. And going back there is a heartbreak. And my mother is still living, so I go back there 2-3 times a year, and it just crushes me every time. And so I continue to write about that place because I'm trying to make sense of it, I suppose, but also because I want it to be remembered. It's a place that it's almost a ghost town. It's just a shell of what it was. And I don't want it to be lost. And so that has been the impulse that has led me to write about it, that I think that is a place that deserves to be remembered. So that is, I would say that about those 3 books. I don't know that I can really extrapolate that to the others. Mercy Street, my last book, was very much suggested by experience. For a number of years, I volunteered at a clinic in Boston that did abortions. And that novel centers around a clinic modeled on the one I worked at. And the main character is a woman who was a counselor at such a clinic, as I was. I was a volunteer, she's a professional, but we were essentially doing that same work. And so had I never had that experience, I would never have written that book. So sometimes it is personal experience. I don't know. It's different every time.
Oh, interesting. And do you read a lot when you're writing, or do you feel like you don't want to be influenced, or how does reading other books fit into your
I badly
process?
want to be influenced. I want to read books that make
Oh.
me better. I want to read books that make me better. Books that are so good that make me think I should just give up and learn to do hair.
Oh, I don't like those.
No, those are the books I want to be reading. Like, that's what I want.
Oh, interesting.
So that's what I'm looking for. So I'm always reading unless I'm teaching. And that to me is my biggest complaint about teaching, which I enjoy doing otherwise. But it kills off my reading life, which is very bad for my writing life. So that's the only time I'm not actively reading, is when I'm teaching.
Do you ever feel like you're reading a book that you love so much, and then it really informs just your style for a month or something?
It does for a minute, but
Yeah.
but because it takes such a long time to write a novel, that then you'll be influenced by the next thing and the next thing. And
Yeah.
if you're reading good stuff, it makes you better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Final one more question. Okay. I love the mother-daughter relationship. Oh my gosh, it was so tragic and real and great. And I'm just wondering if you could. I mean, Lindsay. I guess I'm talking about Lindsay and Claire. A very different relationship, Grace and Claire. But could you just tell us a little bit about that relationship?
Yeah. I love writing mothers and daughters. I'm very close to my mother, but I was also hell on my mother when I was a teenager. I was very critical of my mother and kind of gave my dad a pass, even though my mother was by far the better parent by any objective measure. I was really tough on her. And I think that's not so uncommon with mothers and daughters. And it goes both ways. In the book, Lindsay is very judgmental about her mother. Her mother's also very critical of her. And part of that dynamic, I think, is that Claire wants Lindsay to do better than she did and not repeat her mistakes and improve on her life in some way. And so she puts this kind of pressure on her daughter to know things that she can't know yet at 22 and to be smarter than she can be.
Mhm.
So, I think that's not an uncommon dynamic. And with the opposite sex parent, maybe you don't do it to the same degree because you don't identify in the same way.
That's wonderful. Okay, do we have questions from the audience?
Yes, Michael.
Yes, Michael. Hi.
Good to see you both.
Hi.
Where does the title come from?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The question is, where does the title come from?
So, Rabbit Moon, it is a nod to a Chinese legend about seeing the shape of a rabbit in the moon, the way Westerners think we see the face of a man in the moon. In China, it's a rabbit. And this is something that Lindsay has told her little sister Grace about, the rabbit in the moon. And there's a moment in the book when Grace is at camp in New Hampshire and missing her sister, and she looks up at the moon and thinks how they're looking at the same moon. So it's really, Rabbit Moon is kind of a nod to the relationship between the sisters and how they have this this connection that seems to transcend time.
Yes.
I'm reading Josh's memoir, so I'll get to Rabbit Moon after I finish.
Okay, Josh is my husband, so yeah, let's not.
But I was curious, I just read the first chapter, and I was curious what Nelly Furtado, I'm Like a Bird, why did that speak to you?
Oh, that song. Remember that song? There's something heartbreaking in the quality of her voice. It's a haunting song. And that's the song Lindsay is listening to on her earbud headphones when the car comes around the corner. And I don't know, I've just always loved that song. And there's something about Nelly Furtado's voice that reminds me of Lindsay. So that was the song from the first time, from when I first wrote the scene. That wasn't added later. That was always there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, given how you described your process of writing, the precipitating event, and then what happened, did any of the characters do something that surprised you?
The question is, did any of the characters do anything that surprised you after the precipitating event?
Wow, Michelle, that's a tough one. Thank you. Yes, I mean they all surprised me. The ending for everybody surprised me. I did not know how any of these people's lives was going to unfold in the course of this book. None of them. Yeah, they all surprised me. Yeah, but I don't want to say how because, of course, those would be all spoilers. But they all did.
And when you get surprised, that must be very exciting?
It
when
is.
that happens.
It's a great sign.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's hi Matthew. It's a great sign. It means that the book has a life of its own, and it's not just me forcing things to happen.
Right.
It's kind of like when you're driving a car and you think you have a flat tire. What do? You take your hands off the wheel and see if it's pulling to one side or the other. And
I didn't know that.
And that's
Now
what
I
you
do.
do.
Now I do.
That's
Okay.
what you do.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like figuratively I'm doing that all the time in my work. Which way is the story pulling me? I try to follow the thread that fascinates me. Because I think a very ordinary sort of reader. And if I'm fascinated by something, I trust that somebody else will be fascinated too. So it's really the thing that I always tell myself in the horrible first draft, just write a book that you'd want to read.
Right.
That's it. It sounds so obvious and so stupid when you say it out loud, but truly that's what gets me through the writing of the first draft. And part of that is like listening to the story and noticing when the story is pulling in a direction. My first novel, Mrs. Kimball, it's a story told from the point of view of the first wife, and then the second wife, and then the third wife of the same man. That was not at all the book I set out to write. So when I started writing it, I thought the whole thing was about the story of this first wife whose husband had left. And I found myself fascinated by the husband who was no longer there. So I wondered, well, where did he go next? What did he do? Why did he go? And I just kind of followed that thread. And so that was a good lesson for me very early on, that if the story is pulling in a direction that surprises me, it's something to be respected and explored and not freak out about.
Right. Right. Yes.
One more
the Voltaire quote. So now that I've heard you talk about cause and effect and how much you like that, there's the one cause. There's a lot of, I'm getting back to why I mentioned the Voltaire quote. A lot of cause and effect. There's like little cause and effect. And there's before and after. Did you have that quote in mind before or after you wrote this book?
Okay, this is a question
yeah.
about a Voltaire quote.
About the epigraph, which I will read, so we all know what we're talking about here. I mean, it's translated, of course. Here it is. Chance is a word devoid of sense. Nothing can exist without a cause. And yeah, that really goes to the way I approach story, that kind of emphasis on causality. But it's the only way I'd ever be able to write anything, is because I truly do believe that, and that the answer to what should happen next is already in what I've already written. You know, it's just it's playing out the causal thread.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah.
So since you were able to complete this book after it being abandoned for 5 years, are you considering resurrecting any of your other abandoned works?
Well, I only have the one, and I don't think I could even bear to look at it, to tell you the truth. So here's what went wrong with that. This was a technical problem that I have to date never solved. This was a story that was set further in the past than anything I've ever attempted. So it begins in 1904. And the problem was I could not hear the character's speech in my head. I love writing dialogue. I think I'm good at dialogue. I started out as a playwright. So dialogue is the thing I get really jazzed about. And in this case, the dialogue was excruciatingly bad. It was either anachronistic and sounded too contemporary, or was so like cloyingly old-timey that I could barely stand to read it. So I could not hear a natural voice for these characters. I simply couldn't find it. Part of the problem is we have no recordings of colloquial speech at that time. Like we have recordings of, political speech making and that kind of thing, but not the way people actually spoke to each other. I have a background in oral history. So when I'm doing research for a novel, I do a lot of interviews, and I listen not just to what people are saying, but how they say it, their syntax and their vocabulary and the rhythms of their speech. And so that's something I think is a strength of mine as a writer, and it's a place I begin when I'm starting a novel. I had no way of doing that with this story that opens in 1904. I could not solve that problem, and that's why I put it down. And I still can't imagine how I would solve that problem. So I think I am unlikely to go back to those pages. I mean, never say never, but it's been some years, and it hasn't called to me yet.
Okay, well, any more questions? Yes, please.
So I'm talking about trajectory of your career. So you sort of mastered the sort of regional with Bakerton, and now you've gone all the way halfway around the world. So where do you see, where are you headed in terms of like, because it's such a different.
Yeah. Oh, that's a sneaky question, because I am so close-mouthed about anything I'm writing. I mean, wow. Okay. Really, I never tell anybody anything. The most I will say is the novel I am writing now, that I've been writing for about 1.5 years, is set in the US. And now you already know more about this novel than anybody alive.
Okay, yeah.
So I feel like I've given it all away. But it is set in the US, so I'm back here. But it's not a Bakerton book.
One of the things we discussed was just how I have a novel that I finished, but it's not published yet. And even though it's finished, if I even said what it was about, I would just have a nervous breakdown and have to pull the book, because it would sound so bad and stupid that I just feel like this isn't a book, and it would be over for me. And somehow once it's a book, you can kind of talk about what it's about, but it's really, it's just freaky beforehand. I think it's just very strange. So.
I know people who do it.
Oh my gosh.
I know people. That people actually, I know writers, good writers even, who talk about novels in progress and ask other people's opinions and think out loud. I'm like,
or they send pages to their agent or something.
I don't know. It's just, it's demented, but this happens.
Okay, I know. Okay. Yes. Final question.
Not that it's the best one, but I'm curious about what you said about characters that surprise you.
Yeah.
And because of course they're coming from you, so
Mhm.
it's not a big surprise. But they're imbalanced against this idea of causality, so they have to go in a certain direction, and yet the surprise has to has to come into it as well. So, and that these are the characters in effect speaking to you, but we all know these characters don't exist, and they're in your mind, and they're surprising you, and yet you are the one thinking them up. So I'm curious about that process of what.
Me too. Yeah.
I mean, it just something pops into your head.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
From who knows where, a message from the cosmos, or something like that. Is that how it feels?
You know what? It has everything to do with those months I spend on the front end figuring out who these people are. And I write, I write about their childhoods. I write about their parents and their grandparents and their childhood friends and all this stuff that will never make its way into the book. But in the process of doing that, I find things that surprise me. And that kind of leads me to understand how these people will respond in certain sets of circumstances. So that's where a lot of the surprises start, is writing the backstory of these people. Somebody said to me in an interview the other day that I always write family stories. And I find that so surprising because I never set out to write family stories. I always have an idea about a character or maybe a couple. But because I'm incapable of writing characters until I know where they came from, the family always kind of becomes central to the story. I mean, you know this yourself from dating. You don't know the person you're with until you meet the family. Like there's so much to be mined there. So it's all that preparation I do on the front end. That's all the surprises are unearthed then, I think, or at least the material for the surprises that happen later.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer will be signing books by the register, and thank you for coming.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Thank you to Maria for moderating such a great conversation. And thank you again to Jennifer for celebrating this launch with us. As Maria just mentioned, Jennifer will be signing books right where my coworker Ben is standing. So we're going to ask that you all line up along these fiction shelves.
Okay.
Please make sure to grab all of your personal belongings with you so we can start to break down and rearrange the space. We've got additional copies available for purchase at the register. We just checked in. All right, let's give these two one last round of applause.
Oh, yeah.